everybody, and welcome back to Virtual Storytime at the Castle Shannon Library. This is our regularly scheduled Read and Grow stories at 11:30 on Thursdays. And this week we are taking a break from our alphabet series to talk about and celebrate the 4th of July, because that's happening on Saturday. So the first book that we read at the first story time today, the night before the 4th of July, was the book that I had originally intended to read at all 3 story times today. But like I've said before, it would be very boring if I read you the same story 3 times and recorded it on video. So I picked a couple other books that have to do either with the 4th of July or with American independence, because that's what we celebrate on the 4th of July, Independence Day. So this second book is called Gingerbread for Liberty, How a German Baker Helped with the American Revolution. So I picked this one, because we don't have too many books about the 4th of July here, which I'm surprised by, and I think I'm going to be buying more. And 2, because the American Revolution is one of the things that helped us have independence from Britain, and that's what we celebrate on the 4th of July. So this is a story we might not know a whole lot about. I definitely don't know anything about it, and I've never read this before. So we're going to find out together how a German baker helped with the American Revolution. This book is by Mara Rockliff with pictures by Vincent X. Kirsch. Everyone in Philadelphia knew the gingerbread baker. His honest face, his booming laugh, and of course, his gingerbread, the best in all the 13 colonies. His big flowery hands turned out castles and queens, horses and cows, and hens, each detail drawn in sweet, buttery icing with the greatest skill and care. And yet, despite his care, there always seemed to be some broken pieces for the hungry children who followed their noses to the spicy-smelling shop. No empty bellies here, the baker bellowed, not in my America. For once upon a time, he had been young and hungry too, and he had followed his own nose to the new world where a hardworking young man could open his own bakery and always have enough to eat. But now, something was in the air, besides the smell of baking gingerbread. Newspapers shouted, "Revolution, independence, liberty." Boys rolled up blankets, shouldered guns, and kissed mothers goodbye. The baker hung his apron up. He dusted flour off his hands. "Where are you going?" asked his wife. "To fight for my America," he said. "I was a soldier once." "That was long ago and far away," she said. "You are a baker now, and you are old and fat." She's not very nice. The baker knew his wife was right, but he also knew that he loved his country. Somehow, he had to find a way to help. He packed his bags and went to join General Washington. General Washington did not say the baker was old and fat. General Washington was too polite. Anyway, he had other troubles on his mind. "The men are threatening to leave. They say the food is terrible, and there isn't enough of it." The baker rolled up his sleeves. "No empty bellies here," he told General Washington. "Not in my America." But bigger trouble was on the way. Across the ocean, the King of England wrote to other rulers and hired their armies to help him squash the revolution. "Your Majesty, those Americans think they can beat your redcoats. Ha 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 ha. Humph. What if they're right? Ha ha ha, huh?" When the ship sailed into sight, even General Washington turned pale. Who had ever seen such an army? "Not me, definitely not me." "I have." And who down here is saying "I have"? "These soldiers come from the land where I was born," the baker told General Washington. "Let me go speak to them. Perhaps I can persuade them we are not their enemies. Perhaps I can even persuade them to switch sides." "If you are caught, you will be killed," Washington warned. The baker smiled. "Then I must not be caught." In the darkest hour of the night, he rowed across the bay. With each dip of his oars, he thought of words to win the soldiers over to the American cause. Revolution, splash. Some of these are in German and I don't speak German. Befrieren, independence, splash. I'm just going to stop because this isn't going to end well. Liberty, splash, splash. Liberty in German. But when he looked into their hungry faces, all his fine words slipped away. What could he say? I have a bake shop, he began. As the baker spoke, the soldiers seemed to see the fragrant steam rising from his ovens. They could almost smell the spicy gingerbread and taste the sweet buttery icing on their tongues. And you always have enough to eat? The soldiers asked. No empty bellies here, the baker told them. Not in my America. Across the ocean, Your Majesty, we just don't understand. These hired armies seem to disappear. Many, many loaves and battles later, the British have surrendered. The revolution is over. We won. My work is done, the baker cried. Washington said, not quite. A gift from General Washington. Did he bake the British soldiers gingerbread for their dessert? We'll never know. Down here it says, and his baker. They didn't leave a crumb. And then this last page tells us a little bit more about this baker. So there's no pictures, but I am going to read it to you. It says, Gingerbread for Liberty was based on the life of Christopher Ludwig, a forgotten hero of the American Revolution. Ludwig, or Ludwig, which is the German version, Ludwig with a K is like the American version, and Ludwig with a G is the German version, was born in 1720 in the German region of either Hesse or Hesse. My other languages are not so hot. His father was a baker, and young Christopher helped in the bake shop from an early age. At 17, he joined the army. He served many years as a soldier and sailor before making his way to America, where he set up shop in Philadelphia as a baker of gingerbread. Christopher Ludwig was a big man with a voice to match. When he walked down the street, people knew he was coming, and they were always pleased to see him. They liked his funny turns of phrase and the way he said exactly what was on his mind. He had a temper, but it slipped away as quickly as a summer storm, and underneath, everyone knew he had the kindest heart in Philadelphia. Ludwig loved his new country. When the revolution came, he rushed to serve. Refusing payment, he built ovens and bought flour to bake bread for the hungry troops. He did such a good job that soon he was in charge of baking for the whole Continental Army. After his successful midnight expedition to the British Army camp on Staten Island, Washington also put him in charge of Hessian prisoners of war. Ludwig treated them so well that many joined his side. By the time the Revolutionary War was won, Ludwig felt old and tired. He'd lost half of his sight. During the war, a barrel of flour fell on his head, blinding him in one eye, and most of his life savings. At Washington's orders, when the British surrendered, he baked 6,000 pounds of bread to feed their hungry former enemies. Then, at last, he went home, only to discover that the British had ransacked his house. For weeks, he had to sleep on a bare bed because he had no money to buy sheets. But soon the smell of baking gingerbread wafted out over Philadelphia again. Ludwig was back where he belonged, and he would never leave, not even for a deadly yellow fever outbreak that hit the city in 1798. While others fled, Ludwig rolled up his sleeves and set to work baking free bread to feed the sick and poor. Ludwig was always known for helping anyone in need, children especially. He had none of his own, and his only child had died hours after birth. At a time when there were no public schools, he quietly paid for the education of at least 50 children. When he died in 1801, Ludwig left his money to pay for free schooling for poor children who lived in Philadelphia, regardless of their religion or where their families came from. More than 2 centuries later, the Christopher Ludwig Foundation carries on his aims, giving about $200,000 in grants each year to programs that help educate needy children in the city of Philadelphia. Most of what is known today about Ludwig's life comes from a brief account written by his friend Dr. Benjamin Rush, a founding father and signer of the Declaration of Independence. However, Ludwig's name appears in many documents of the period. Among them is a letter written by George Washington in 1785, praising Ludwig for his service in the war and calling him a true and faithful servant to the public. He also made very good gingerbread. So, that is a partially non-fiction story because it tells about the life of a real person. Since we don't know if all 100% of what they wrote is true, that's why it's a picture book and it's not in the non-fiction section. But this is one, if you enjoyed that and you'd like to read it again, it's one we have here at the library that you can check out. Hopefully you are staying safe and healthy. I hope you enjoyed this story time, and if you'd like to come back for one more, there's one at 4 o'clock today. And we hope to see you back at the library soon, and have a good 4th of July. Have a good day.